You have the right to wear the veil and niqab, and I support this right personally. Are you also going to stand up for my right to wear whatever I like?
Lisa, do they have the right to wear those T-shirts?
Yes or no?
No. Why are you trying to offend a religious faith?
You're offending us.
Hello again, welcome to the first Godless Spellchecker podcast of 2014. I'm sure you're all thrilled to hear this jingle again. Firstly, a huge thanks to everyone who listened to my Christmas podcast over December. They're still available in Stitcher, iTunes and YouTube. I've got a great guest lined up for the first show of the year. I'm fortunate enough to be joined by Moos. Chris has been in the spotlight recently for his tireless efforts to uphold freedom of expression. We'll be talking about the intimidation he and his colleagues experienced. This was for the perceived offence of wearing a Jesus and Mo t-shirt at an annual Freshers' Fair at London School of Economics. These events have actually snowballed in the UK somewhat. Further discussions led to death threats towards a political party candidate and a huge row over censorship. I'm delighted to have with me, talking free expression, Moos. He's the secretary of the Atheist, Secularist, Humanist Student Society of the London School of Economics. Hello, Chris.
Hello there.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you. I want to start by saying congratulations for reaching the final nominations of the Secularist of the Year award.
Thank you.
That's got to be exciting.
Well, no, it's fairly exciting, and it's really great to see that our work, the hard work that Abhishek and I have been doing, is being recognised by the secularist community.
The reason I want to talk to you today is because you've been a very busy man of late, embroiled in a freedom of expression discussion right at the forefront of it. I just wondered if you could explain what exactly the purpose of the Atheist, Secularist and Humanist Student Society is, and how that's landed you in trouble.
Well, I mean, we are just a normal student society which just provides a platform for non-believing atheist, secularist, humanist, and everyone who identifies themselves with something like agnosticism, rationalism, and so on. So what we do, our main business when we're not fighting battles for freedom of expression, is just mainly we do organize socials and for non-believing students, secularist students, and do a lot of talks and events. We had people like Mariam Namazi, for example, coming in and speak for us, and other renowned secularists.
Right, yeah, I mean, I've seen Mariam Namazi speak myself. I'm very, very impressed by how passionate she is. I find her quite inspirational. So obviously she chairs the One Law for All campaign, doesn't she? Fitna,
women's rights movement, the Council of Muslims of Britain, and so on and so on. So she's quite a busy woman indeed.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd imagine you during Freshers' Fair is when you've got lots of new faces coming in, lots of bright young minds looking for societies and causes and things to get involved in. And what would you have, like typically a stall set out for so people can come and get information?
Yeah, exactly. That's what we had. We had our little stall, 2 tables there, and we had our leaflets, and we were just standing there behind the stall and, greeting people who came by and were interested in our society as usual.
So you was wearing as well the absolutely fantastic comic strips on your T-shirt from the Jesus and Mo website.
Yeah, indeed. And, that, interestingly enough, we had worn those with the intention of providing for a outreach to non-believing and atheist secular students who know these T-shirts, and as we know that, or the comic strip, as we know, Jesus and Mo are very popular in the non-believing or atheist community. We thought that'd be a very good starting point for a discussion, getting people interested in our society, and this is what happened. We had loads of people coming up to us, talking to us, telling us our T-shirts were great, they were taking pictures with us, and so we did not even have a single complaint or even not a single negative comment about our T-shirts until things escalated.
Yeah. When did you notice there was an issue, shall we say? What was the first sign that someone wasn't happy?
Well, there was the Abhishek just told me. I didn't even realize that we was talking to people. They told me that a students' union officer just had come by and said that we needed to lose the T-shirts. I was just really baffled about that, obviously, and I was like, well, I mean, let's just wait and see. I mean, if they really want something, they'll probably come back and talk to us. And so they did indeed. So there were several student unions officers who came then back and then demanded that we take off the T-shirts. Well, when we refused, they first left, and then they came back and started ripping off the materials from our stall, also claiming because they were offensive, because we had also like a cartoon posted to Jesus and Mo cartoon posted to the wall behind us.
Wow, so physically removing items from the stall that they themselves found were offensive.
Yeah, exactly. And shockingly, there was actually the community and welfare officer, Anissa Mahmoud, who was leading that, who was actually physically ripping down our stuff. So yeah, that was quite frightening, as you can imagine.
Yeah, it sounds like a fairly intimidating situation, to be fair.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we were intimidated, and they also made they came in strong numbers. There were like five, 6 people at some point surrounding us, and like really actually physically surrounding us, and talking to us very aggressively and in a very intimidating way. And we felt it was also very humiliating, of course, in front of the other students who were, of course, looking at us like, what's actually going on here, right? We were being treated as we were being, some kind of criminal, as we had done something wrong, So that was quite demeaning.
So this seems more a decision taken by overzealous members of the security service or the organisers, rather than anyone or sort of on-the-floor complaints to what you was offering.
Well, that is exactly the issue that we raised afterwards with the school. We asked them several times to provide us with written evidence of any kind of complaints that they had received, and they never provided us this evidence. They never did. So we don't know if people complained, and if so, who complained. We think it's a possibility that what actually happened was that the student union officers were, so to speak, getting offended on behalf of others, and without even actually any kind of complaint. But again, as we don't have any evidence for that, and we haven't seen any evidence.
Sure, yeah. I mean, so this got a lot of media traction. Names in the atheist community picked up, and I think Richard Dawkins spoke a lot about it on his Twitter feed. I think people from the British Humanist Association and the National Secular Society got in touch as well. Is that right?
Exactly. That's the first thing that I did. Then I contacted the BHA, British Humanist Association, and the National Secular Society when I realised they weren't letting off, and when they then actually called in the head of legal and compliance and the actual Kevin Haynes at the LSE, and then the pro-director for teaching and learning, which is basically the second highest position in the school, who were actually marching up to our stall, inspecting us from head to toe, and disappearing then again. And then at some point we had the head of LSE security coming up to us and telling us that there's been an investigation and it's going to be decided what's going to happen with us. And at some point after these talks, they decided they would actually physically remove us. And so they surround us with security guards and asked us to cover the T-shirts or remove them. If not, they were going to physically remove us. And they were actually already removing our materials and the tables in order to facilitate the removal, I can only assume. Only when we then zipped up the T-shirts, the actual sweaters that were covering the T-shirts, is then when they actually did not, desisted from having us physically removed. They did, however, and I think that's an important and very horrifying detail, they said, the head of security afterwards told us, so I see a risk that you might be opening your sweaters again after we have left, so I will actually have 2 security guards positioned next to you, who will be following you around and standing next to your stall, and to monitor whether you are unzipping these sweaters again, and if you do so, you will be physically removed. So we had, in an absolutely surreal situation, we had 2 security guards standing next to us, monitoring every movement we did. When we left the room to go to the toilet, they were actually following us. And in the second day, what actually happened was that we had, so to speak, self-censored some of the cartoons. We had put some tape over the faces of Jesus and Mo, because that's what we understood were the offensive parts, although we had never been actually told what exactly was offensive about the cartoons. I mean, this is what we always asked the security guards. as well as the student union officers. Tell us exactly what is offensive, and then we will consider covering up or do whatever. But they never wanted to engage in that discussion. Quite obviously, for me now, why they didn't want to do so, because they would have needed to say actually that you cannot show religious figures. That is, we will consider this as being something blasphemous. And therefore, we will accuse you, and that's what they did, accused us of harassing others. We were actually accused of breaching the harassment policy at LSE, and possibly the Freedom and the Equality Act 2010 too. So we are not only accused of harassing people and offending people, but also of possibly committing a crime, a criminal offence.
Wow, so that got serious very quickly. I mean, like you say, what we essentially seeing here is enforcement of blasphemy laws in British 21st century academic institutions, which is incredibly concerning. I believe you did finally receive an apology. I say apology, but I have read it, and it's very blame-shifting in its sort of retraction of the incident.
Well, first of all, we have only received what we call a half apology from LSE itself. LSE has said they were sorry, they apologized for the decision taken, although they emphasized right away, we believe they were taken in good faith, which is quite insidious, if in my opinion, because what is clear is that this decision was not being taken in good faith. It was a clear decision that preacher rules or actual rights were not taken into account at all. The actual obligation of a university to comply with the Higher Education Act 1986, which clearly prescribes that universities specifically have a duty to uphold freedom of expression on university premises, has not been taken into account. And therefore, as they saw a threat of legal action coming up, they decided that it might be less humiliating and embarrassing for them to issue this half-hearted apology. However, they never apologized for the actual harassment, the humiliation, and the mutilation that we suffered at the hands of the LSE security guards. And if I can just add this, what is more concerning to me, actually, personally, is that the students' union, who are by definition there to protect students, especially protect students from interference from the university. This is the job of a students' union, clearly. They were the ones who not only started this chain of harassment, who did harass and humiliate us very clearly in front of others, but they, until this day, they have never apologized for harassing us. And we have written to Jay Stoll, the General Secretary of the Students' Union. We have suggested we would like at least to have an apology from Anissa Mahmood, from Rayuddin, from Jonathan O'Hara, from Jay Stoll himself, and never we actually have received any kind of apology for what we have gone through and for the harassment we suffered. This is really shocking to me, and still is.
But you eventually ended up on The Big Questions, which is, if anyone doesn't know, it's a BBC Sunday morning, I think it's Sunday morning, isn't it, topical discussion, which usually consists of religious people shouting at each other, but we can get a good discussion going every now and then. So how do you end up on The Big Questions? Are you invited on, or do you ask to be?
Oh, well, we were just invited. They somehow found our details online, because there had been quite some reporting in the national press on that already. So they just invited us to be part of the audience. And since we're actually also involved in the campaign against gender segregation, that also kicked up then in December.
Yeah.
Since we had been involved in this, we had been attending an event with students segregated at UCL in March too. So we both involved in these big cases which touch on human rights and religious rights, and this question of the BBC question. And so we were asked to sit in the front row and comment on these issues, and so we did.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that as well. You actually on the show, you was wearing the Jesus and Mo T-shirts, but they were concealed to begin with. I was just wondering if there was any way you mentioned that to the BBC before that you were wearing them, or was it a surprise when you revealed them? Because I think they seemed to cut away or at least pull out camera-wise.
Well, not at all. Actually, they actually suggested we wear the T-shirts.
Right. Okay.
They actually they when they emailed us, they said like so I mean, if you want to wear the T-shirts, please do so, but please conceal them, like zip them, like with a sweater, for example.
So please wear them, but don't show them.
Well, they said what I can only tell you what they said was that they in general advise audience members not to have any kind of clothing with depictions or anything like that, just to not take away attention from the program or something like that. That's what they said, and I hear that's actually normal to have this kind of advice for these kind of shows. So, but they had said to us, and if Nikki Campbell then would like to see the T-shirts like in the discussion, then you can zip them up, and this is exactly what happened.
Right. So we have a situation where you sat there, and also a guest there was Majid Nawaz, he's the founder of the anti-extremist think tank Quilliam. Also happens to be a parliamentary candidate for the Lib Dems as well, and he's quite a moderate. He speaks for secularism and free speech. From what I've seen, he took the opportunity to voice his opinion that he wasn't offended by the T-shirts at all, and he supported your right to wear them. Exactly,
we're really heartened by this endorsement, of course, and apparently not everyone was, though.
No, to be honest, the religious hypocrisy on that episode was comedy gold. We had different factions, different religions, all incredibly passionate that their right to manifest their religion must be upheld, and it mustn't be opposed. And then when they was asked analogous examples, I think, for instance, we had a woman that was saying the people who had the bed and breakfast should be able to refuse service to homosexuals.
Yes.
But when she was asked, should a Muslim be able to refuse selling pork, she said no, they shouldn't be allowed to work on a till. It was one giant irony explosion from the get-go. But what the fallout from that incident was Majid Nawaz basically reiterated his stance on this on his Twitter feed.
Well, what he said was that he was outraged that the BBC actually had refused to show our cartoons. So like our T-shirts, what they did is they just showed wide, long shots. They didn't show actual close-up of the T-shirts, which again is a bit ludicrous when you actually discuss T-shirts and the viewers can not really see what is on the T-shirts. And he actually said in defense of us and tweeted this picture then of Jesus and Mars saying, hi, how are you doing to each other? Well, I'm not offended by that.
That's great, and that's exactly what we want from sort of moderate Muslims is to stand up, because we basically it is an extremist view to be incited over depictions of the Prophet Muhammad. So secular voices are good in this argument, but it caused one hell of a storm. It was the main linchpin, from what I could see, was Mohammed Shafiq. He's the chief exec of the Ramadan Foundation, and he described what Nawaz had done with an Urdu term which means defamer of the Prophet.
Indeed.
Which I'm led to believe is more or less a death sentence in sort of Islamic countries.
It is definitely, I think it is also illegal. It is legally carries a death sentence in Pakistan, but apart from the legal threat or death threat, the more, or like just what is as worrying is that people who are actually accused of defaming the Prophet are regularly just killed by lynch mobs on the streets in Pakistan. And this is more worrying, so knowing that Majid is from Pakistani origin, he has a lot of family in Pakistan and he travels there many times also professionally for Quilliam, for the anti-extremism work he's doing there. So this is not just an empty threat, you can say, it's a defame of the Prophet. This carries a very specific meaning and incites people to murder.
This is incredibly surprising from somebody who themselves found themselves subject to a death list. So Al-Shabaab, I think, threatened him along with Mo Ansar for their sort of progressive views. So then they themselves have sort of been on the receiving end of fundamentalism threats. And then to do something like that, there's no other way to put it. It's just vastly irresponsible.
It is very irresponsible, especially for someone who has, suffered these death threats themselves. What I would say, though, is that I think what is happening is that there's a very clear way, like we can really clearly see from the way this has been handled, that this is actually, again, someone using the Muslim communities and using Muslim sensitivities concerning a certain issue, or to whip up political tensions. So I don't believe for a second that Mohammed Shafiq is indeed concerned about any depiction of the Prophet himself or Moansa. And Moansa, for example, has said himself that he is not offended by the picture himself. What they are doing, though, they're trying to use the Muslim community in order to create tensions at the expense of liberal and secular Muslims who just want to live their life just normally, like everyone else, obviously. And on the other hand, people like Shafiq and Moansa, they know very well that by playing this Muslim or victim card, which is essentially an Islamist strategy, they can actually, sharpen their profile as defenders of the honor of Muslims, which they are not. They are actually contributing very clearly to Muslims being stereotyped, being perceived as intolerant, and as not respecting the rights of others.
Exactly, and I think the media's fanning the flames of that a little bit as well in their decision to censor the images themselves. I think I sat down for something to eat the other day and put the news on. It was Channel 4 and it was Jon Snow talking. And the image in question, which is the image the entire discussion's about, it's the catalyst. This is very much about the cartoon. And they displayed it on the TV, and there was just a big black egg where Muhammad should have been. And it was at that point I nearly spat my food out like a bad sitcom scene, because I just couldn't believe it had been done. I mean, surely that's one, disparaging Muslims and saying that every Muslim's offended by this, and two, it's taking sides in the debate as well.
Exactly. I was talking, so as you probably saw, I did the Channel 4 interview.
I did, yeah.
Before I came in, before Jon Snow brought the Majinawar story. And so I talked to them, and they actually said, well, first they asked me, could you wear the T-shirt? And I was just at work. I said, well, I don't have it with me right now, so I can't come right now with a T-shirt. So, and then I asked them, well, would you show it anyway if I did? And the journalist I was talking to, she's like, well, it's not my hand. Of course, I would like to show it, but I think they're not gonna show it because they are afraid, they're scared. And she said, I'm scared too. I'm just scared.
You can't argue with that. I mean, my main contention of this entire affair recently has not necessarily been that they haven't shown the image, because they do have a right to fear reprisals. But it's the fact they're not honest about the reasons for not showing it. They're quite vocal about saying we're not trying to offend people. It's the hurt feelings that are our concern, when really they're afraid.
Exactly, and I think if really people were just honest about it, as simply said, we don't want to have our houses firebombed, we don't want to have ourselves and our families killed and threatened and persecuted in the vilest manner. I think that'd be a first step in order to recognize the actual problem. What they are doing is actually essentially hiding behind some warped concept of journalistic integrity and journalistic standards, where they're claiming it's not relevant to the story, so we don't need to show it, which is again ludicrous, because you talk about an actual cartoon without informing the readers what these cartoons actually are. I mean, let them make up their minds themselves, right?
Yeah, sure.
On the other hand, as you pointed out, they are clearly taking a side here. They're saying this is actually way too offensive, and specifically only the depiction of Muhammad, not of Jesus, of course. They can just show Jesus. Christians can be offended, but a Muslim cannot be, and that is for me basically another shows the undercurrent racist of many of the attitudes we see, in the sense that, again, Muslims are being seen as others. They're being seen as different, essentially a hierarchy different from Christians and others. They are being seen as someone who cannot be possibly expected to be upheld to the same standards of behavior and tolerance and respect for others' rights than anyone else. And this is extremely patronizing and infantilizing and demeaning to Muslims.
I agree. I mean, you can't stress enough the difference between your right to be offended and then censorship. It's a very different scenario completely, where everybody can be offended, everybody can say, I don't like that, I'd rather you didn't do that, but there seems to be a concerted effort to actually suppress the free speech. When, I don't think we mentioned this, there was the petition drawn out to actually have Majid Nawaz removed from his position as the representative for the Lib Dems. I think that last check, that garnered over 20,000 signatures.
Yes. Which
is no small number, really. So there is a lot of people who do genuinely feel that there is no middle ground on this.
Well, I think, if I may just point that out, the petition I have started in defense of Majid Nawaz also got 7,500 signatures, I think, by now. So there's also a substantial number of people who actually defends the right of Majid Nawaz, and among them, of course, many Muslims defend the right of Majid Nawaz to post any kind of cartoons. So I think we have to be clear here. This is, and they actually admitted to this. This is, again, I don't think this is about actual legitimate Muslim concerns about specific kind of grievances. On Five Pillars, which is an Islamist website, they yesterday had an article written there by someone who works for Press TV, the Iranian propaganda channel. And he said clearly there, and I think he's really spot on with that, this is not about a cartoon. This is about payback. Payback for Majid Nawaz having a platform speaking as a liberal Muslim, as a secular Muslim, and effectively thereby showing that Muslims being Muslim and living in a democratic society is perfectly compatible, and being standing up for liberal values, whereas what the agenda of the Islamists is to actually create divisions, have Muslims as others who are not able and willing to integrate into society and behave and respect and have rights just in the same way that everyone else has.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, the modus operandi of Islamists is to be offended. I've heard a lot of arguments this week that, well, you shouldn't show the cartoon if it's going to cause violence, if it's going to offend. But, I mean, my argument to that is they will always find something to be offended by and to propagate their sort of Islamist agenda anyway.
I think that is absolutely true. I mean, I think that there's 2 points. I mean, first of all, the causality here. Cartoons do not kill people. They do not kill people, very clearly not. People kill people. Lunatics who go out and kill others because they do whatever they want to do, they did, are those who kill. A cartoon never kills a person. And as you very rightly point out, there are many ways that Islamists are whipping up tensions against non-Muslims, against the perceived Western threat, and so on and so on. And these cartoons are just an excuse. If they don't use cartoons, they will use another excuse. There has been a very recent, very worrying development. I've just been informed that there has been an article on Pakistan Daily, which is a major newspaper, right-wing newspaper in Pakistan, about Majid Nawaz having with his picture and describing him again as a defamer of the Prophet, and asking readers actually to comment on what their preferred punishment for Majid Nawaz is. And I'm just having some friends who speak Urdu translate that for me to be sure about the accuracy. But from what I've heard until now is that there are 300 or so comments who call now for the death of Majid Nawaz in the most despicable and vile manner. And so Mo Shafiq said he was going to inform Islamic countries, and in order to basically, what it basically is to pump it up into a Danish cartoon-style controversy. And he certainly has achieved that goal now. It is very clear that now that this is even getting traction in Pakistan, the life of Majid Nawaz is definitely not safe anymore. And hopefully this will not have any major repercussions for his life here in the UK. But as we know how Islamists work, this is actually a possibility.
That is deeply concerning. So yeah, we'll keep an eye on how that develops. But we've reached this horrible situation now where not only is it offence that can put your life in danger, but not being offended as well, which is an absurd situation to find ourselves in.
Exactly.
All right, Chris. Well, I fully appreciate you coming to chat with me. I wish you all the best in March at the NSS Secularist of the Year Awards.
Thank you.
I'm thinking about getting some tickets myself and coming down to London because it's been a while.
Would be great to meet you there.
Yeah, it'd be nice to meet you. All right. Well, thank you very much, Chris, and take care.
Have a nice evening. Bye.
Thank you to Chris for joining me on my podcast. You can follow him on Twitter. That's at Chris Moos _MOOS. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share. You can also contribute and donate to the podcast by visiting gspellchecker.wordpress.com. I think we've all learned something here today.